Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. We have got a lot to discuss on today in the world of Palantir. I just want to say again, I am loving this new format, finding all the stories of the day, picking the ones that are the most important, and then segmenting them into one 20-minute episode. I'm getting a lot of feedback on the past 4 episodes. We're episode number 5, so we're 5 episodes in, that other people are really loving this format. It's way easier for them to consume. They know exactly what they're getting every day, and then they can, be updated on what's going on. So I'm loving it. I'm really liking it a lot. I think there is a long trajectory forward for the direction of a show like this to really encompass everything going on in the world in Palantir every single day. And even yesterday, I got the video out super late for my US audience at 8:45 p.m. because I had all these technical difficulties. But people still appreciated it. So thank you guys for the support in the new format. And we're going to keep it going every single day. We've got a lot to talk about today. What do we got on the docket? Number 1, we got some price action that's going to be really important for Palantir and some of the rebound we've seen after it fell below $17. Number 2, Ukraine has finally publicly acknowledged using Palantir. And I know they've acknowledged it in the past with a PR, but we saw someone very high up in Ukraine tweet about Palantir today. And I thought that tweet was incredible in terms of how they're using AIP. So we're going to be discussing that. Third, we're going to be discussing some further negative press Palantir is getting in the UK just days before we're supposedly supposed to get this $580 million contract for something Palantir did back in 2022. And spoiler alert, they actually did something really helpful for the people of Ukraine in the United Kingdom in March of 2022, and now they're getting hate for it. So we'll discuss that and sort of the more negative press that's going on in order to stop Palantir from getting this NHS contract. And then finally, Shyam, Sankar, a lot of people didn't catch this, published a new article in the wake of what's going on with Israel and Hamas just a couple days ago, and we're going to be talking about his new article. Let's get into it. We got a lot to discuss. Okay, so first thing we're going to start off with is, of course, price action. Palantir is $17.78, up 2.39% on the day, about an hour away from market close. Not a bad day for Palantir. As you can see on the left-hand side of my screen, NVIDIA's red, Intel's red, AMD is red, Taiwan Semiconductor is red, NVIDIA getting the brunt of it, down 5% on the day. And the reason for this is because the United States showed new restrictions this morning that would be banning the H100 processors and chips from being sold into China. So obviously the market perception is that if NVIDIA can't sell these chips into China, there is going to be less revenue growth in the future. And so as a result of that, NVIDIA, AMD, Intel, Taiwan Semis, a lot of these semiconductor companies are down for the day. And that took the entire market down. S&P 500 was at 432, right now at 435. Palantir was also below $17. It opened red in the market open, and then it bounced right back up to $17.77, which was not bad at all in terms of its price action. It honestly feels that Palantir from this $16 to $18.40 range is like a game. But seeing Palantir go from $16.90 to $17.77 today in a matter of a couple hours got me as wet as a squid that it almost made me feel like I should go back to Netflix and watch Squid Game. So the Palantir price action is just phenomenal today. We got Google also at 140, Robinhood at 957, and we got some of the Bitcoin stocks up as well, as Bitcoin is at 28,418. So in terms of price action, we're seeing pretty good movement on Palantir being stuck in this $17 range, and hopefully we can capitulate here and this becomes theoretically a new bottom for Palantir. All right, on to the biggest news of the day. We had a tweet that really caught my attention, and I think it's very important for every Palantir shareholder to understand what's going on with this tweet and why this person tweeted it out. Mikhailo Fedorov, I'm sorry if I'm saying his name wrong, the Vice Prime Minister of Innovations, Development of Education, Science and Technologies, and the Minister of Digital Transformation of Ukraine, one of the top executives and generals that we see in Ukraine, stand with Zelensky and many times make public statements. He said today, "Conversation with data. Jointly with @Palantir Tech, we create a virtual assistant for the government. Revolutionary tool powered by AI will help to find out the number of destroyed schools, minefields, suggest rebuilding plans, etc. Ukraine is the best place to test the newest technology." I mean, this here was just phenomenal to see. We knew Palantir was implementing their technology in Ukraine ever since really March of 2022 when it became public that Palantir was working with Ukraine. And then we had Alex Karp meet with Volodymyr Zelensky, one of the first public CEOs to go down to Ukraine and say, hey, basically our software is free for you to use whatever you need as long as you can help protect your democracy. Now we're seeing one of the top vice presidents of Ukraine basically say publicly, hey, if you want to test new technology, you come to Ukraine because what we're building in conjunction with Palantir is a quote-unquote revolutionary tool powered by AI. And as you can see at the bottom right here, this is Palantir's AIP. This is not Foundry that we sold them back in 2022. AIP wasn't even a thing yet. Obviously, AIP uses Foundry. But now it seems like we upsold them onto something even better. And by upsold, I don't know if we got any money out of this, but The idea is they're using a very, very important tool that Palantir has developed that we think is the future trajectory of the company, which is their AIP terminal. And in the context of this terminal, they're able to use the number of destroyed schools, obviously because there's a war going on in Ukraine, minefields, so that soldiers don't step into those and die, and suggest potential rebuilding plans to be able to solve those issues. We saw this press release by Palantir and the Ministry of Digital Transformation. That person that I just showed you is the general, is the person who controls the entire Ministry of Digital Transformation of Ukraine. And so he intimately understands Palantir. He obviously runs this entire ministry, has worked with the software for a long time. And they announced this back in May of 2023 that Palantir was going to be able to enhance the digital capabilities for electronic public services, support and coordinate a digitally led reconstruction of Ukraine, consolidate the efforts in the field of digitization, digital innovations, and integration of Ukraine to the international markets, and promote the implementation of projects with the support of the armed forces. In fact, he gave a quote, that same person that I talked about today, who says, it's an honor for us to continue developing partnerships with such a top-notch company. Palantir is already making its contribution to Ukraine's victory by sharing its tools and intelligence, and we are excited to proceed with a new stage of cooperation within Ukraine's recovery. Having a presence on the ground here since the full-scale invasion also means a lot for the economy and building a new image of Ukraine, bold and digital. I cannot stress how important that is. It's important for a couple of reasons. Number one, you finally have some broader acknowledgement, and I know this press release came out, right? And a press release is cool a couple months ago, but to see someone actually tweet how they're using the software, give actual examples of what the software is being used, and being relatively public about the fact that they are in tandem with Palantir building, in their words, revolutionary AI tools that are going to help them digitally transform an entire country. That means that there is a lot of work for Palantir to do in Ukraine. That's the first point of analysis. I don't know if we're getting any money from giving this stuff to Ukraine. I imagine because the United States is giving Ukraine billions of dollars, they definitely have the money to spend on things like this. So Palantir should be able to get some money for that in the future. But that contract we signed with the Digital Ministry of Transformation in Ukraine, the whole goal of that contract was, okay, Ukraine has been decimated by the war. Eventually this war will come to an end, and Ukraine will have to not only integrate back into the global markets, but Ukraine will have to rebuild their entire infrastructure because everything has been destroyed. And as a result of rebuilding your entire infrastructure, you need the software infrastructure to help you actually get to the point where the country is up and running again in a meaningful way. That, I believe, will be worth a lot of money in the future. I don't know what that deal looks like yet. I don't know if we've collected any of that revenue, but I do know Palantir is not going to be there for the next 5 years rebuilding an entire country and not make any money off of that. So that's the first point of analysis. I think there's a lot of money coming in the future, even if that money's not coming right now. And what Palantir is going to be able to do in Ukraine, quite literally, as he said on Twitter, is the best place to test your new technology. What's a better test than not only your technology being used on the battlefield, but your technology being used to recreate a society after the damages from the battlefield? It really seems like Palantir is going to be playing a pivotal role here, and it's going to be incredibly important for Ukraine going forward. Second piece of analysis is what's going on in Israel. We're going to talk more about that a little bit later in the show, but if Palantir is able to rebuild Ukraine, you could imagine there's going to be some issues in Israel, and if anything, their actual military might be able to use Palantir. If they're inextricably being used with Ukraine to defend their sovereignty against an enemy to Ukraine, then you could imagine that Israel would be interested in Palantir. Dan Ives yesterday on the show said that Palantir will be the eyes and ears of Israel. We don't know if that's going to happen, but just seeing how intimately they're working with Ukraine on the battlefield and then helping them after the effects of the battlefield, you would imagine that something like IDF, the Israeli Defense Force, would be interested in at least learning about what Palantir is. And maybe that's also why Palantir doubled down on their statement for why they stand with Israel. Final point of analysis on this is that BlackRock and JP Morgan are looking to commit billions of dollars, tens of billions of dollars, to creating investment opportunities in Ukraine to recreate the country. Because from their perspective as investment funds, they're like, all right, there's a lot of opportunity to allocate a lot of capital to a lot of investments to be able to rebuild the entire country. And I would imagine that if Palantir is the premier partner with the Digital Transformation Ministry of Ukraine, that there is a world in which Palantir can either get some of that money or partner with those institutions to help figure out how to fund different projects going on in Ukraine. It seems like if you build multiple new schools and AIP is the backbone to be able to understand how those schools are built, then that is a world in which Palantir is able to benefit from the building of those schools and potentially have further contracts of building of other institutions in Ukraine. So overall, very, very important for Palantir to be able to get this contract. On top of that, I want to give a quick shout out to Daniel Weston, who is the head of the CEO of the European Cricket Network. Was a foundry for a builders company, which is like startups that use Palantir's foundry, and he's been working with Palantir for the past 3-4 years now. This is what he tweeted yesterday. Tonight, AIP Assist was wrong on the first 4 suggestions, but on the 5th suggestion, it was pure gold. A great undocumented feature with Palantir tech added to the programming language. AIP Assist knew about it once I pointed out through the previous 4 mistakes. This saves me 200 hours per year. And he tagged Shyam Sankar. So even him, he's not running an entire country like Ukraine, but a relatively smaller company like the European Cricket Network, which is basically a media company for cricket in Europe. AIP is relevant to him there. And so the scope of clients, whether it's an entire country or whether it's a media company covering cricket, it seems like all of them are finding benefits from AIP. All right, next piece of news that's super interesting here is the article from The Register. I think this was initially published on The Telegraph. Let me know if there's anyone in the UK. Are these are these just like tabloids, Telegraph, The Register, all these companies in the UK? Are they like legit news sources, or do they just like put out a bunch of stuff for clicks? Because I understand if they do that, but I feel like that's what these websites are. Here's the headline today. UK government slammed for Palantir's free trial period deal in Ukraine housing scheme. Okay, so let me read a little bit of it and then give some context. The UK's chief commercial officer is warning a government contract with Palantir was awarded against public procurement principles after the US spy tech biz, gotta add spy tech biz, got a toehold in the Homes for Ukraine scheme via a 6-month trial period. Palantir's approach to the refugee housing scheme closely echoes its tactics in the UK health system when it began working during the height of the pandemic for a nominal fee of £1. It was subsequently awarded $73 million in NHS contracts without competition, and it is now hotly tipped to win the $584 million federated data platform. Okay, so for those that don't remember, Homes for Ukraine was a campaign that the United Kingdom launched back in March of 2022. I remember covering it the day it broke, which was essentially their way to allow Ukrainian refugees to come into the UK. So right now we're getting a ton of refugees from Gaza, and they kind of have nowhere to go, potentially Egypt. We'll see what ends up happening. But with Ukraine back in 2022, the UK opened up their doors and they said, hey, you're allowed to come into our country. Now, when you open your door to hundreds of thousands of people and your borders to let them into your country, there's a lot of data that's associated with that. You have hundreds of thousands of people. You've got to know their names, their genders, their preferences, all these different things. You have a ton of different specific data about where they came from, so you can match them from a geolocation perspective. On top of that, they're matching them with houses in Ukraine, so in the UK. So people in the UK opened up their houses to allow refugees to stay. If there's a refugee that is like vegan and you put them in a house where they don't eat vegan stuff, they only eat meat, that's a problem, right? And so that's a problem that can be solved if you have the data to be able to understand how do we match all of these people that are coming in and take all of their personal data, make sure it's fully confidential, centralized in one location. That's what Foundry is useful for. And then be able to make decisions and applications based on the insights we get from all those decisions. That's why within a matter of a couple of weeks, when the United Kingdom started this campaign, by the way, the reason they started in a couple of weeks is because there were hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians that became refugees within a couple of weeks. They gave the deal to Palantir. They had already worked with Palantir in the context of the NHS, so they knew that Palantir has the ability to optimize and create databases and ontologize information immediately and then be able to help companies and governments make decisions, so they gave the contract to Palantir. What this article is stating is that the UK unfairly didn't have a public procurement process and just unilaterally decided to give the deal to Palantir, and that was bad because it's just showing how this US spy tech biz is infiltrating all of our data in the United Kingdom, and that's what they're going to do with the NHS. The simple retort to this article today, I was just kind of laughing reading this article, is that I don't know about you, but if a couple 100,000 people are homeless within a matter of a couple of weeks, I don't think there's the most time in the world to run a public procurement process. I don't know, 6 weeks, 6 months, I don't know how long that takes, even if it takes 2 weeks, to be able to have all these vendors bid against each other, even though I know it's UK law that you have to have a public procurement process and have people bid so that it's a meritocratic procurement system in order to be able to make a decision. I get that that's what the law says, but when there's a refugee crisis and you need that thing to be done within seconds, not even days, seconds, you need the system to be ready, built, and actually working, you go to the most trusted sources. So to me, this article was actually very bullish for Palantir and very bullish for Palantir getting this NHS contract, because the reason Palantir got that contract to do Homes for Ukraine, back in March of 2022 is because there was a refugee crisis in a matter of weeks, and Palantir was able to get set up in a matter of days to be able to at least offer the AI software data backbone to the United Kingdom to be able to carry out this campaign and match people in the right homes. So, to me, this entire article basically complaining that Palantir got this unmeritocratically, I actually think no. Palantir had proved to the entire UK government that they work. It's not like the UK government doesn't want to give contracts to UK companies. They've always given contracts to UK companies. It's not like they're being paid off by Palantir. It's what works, what can get the job done the quickest, and what do we have experience with. Palantir just so happened to match all three of those criteria, and that's why they got the deal. So to me, this is just bullish for Palantir getting further contracts from the UK, being trusted by the UK, and inevitably getting this NHS deal, which hopefully should be announced in the next couple of weeks, maybe in the next couple of days. All right, official last topic of the day. People didn't realize this one, but Palantir's Greg Little, Madeline Zimmerman, and Shyam Sankar, they put out an article called Avoiding Too Late. This is on thefirstbreakfast.substack.com. And apparently Palantir put out a piece talking a lot about what's going on within Israel right now. This came out October 15th, October 14th, just 3 days ago. It was missed by a lot of people, and I just found it the other day, and I was like, oh, this is from the guy himself, the CTO of Palantir. I should probably read it and try to understand what they're thinking around what's going on with Israel and Hamas. So 5 bullet points of summarizing this article. I actually think it was really good and heightens a shareholder's understanding of how they're thinking of the Israel crisis and what Palantir's role might be in the future. Number 1, they talked about all the recent atrocities being held out in Israel, carried out by Iran-funded Hamas, emphasizing the need for the United States to address rising tensions with Russia, China, and Iran. So it was Russia and China for the past year. Now Iran has entered the mix because most likely Iran has funded Hamas. So the first point is like, look, we really need to pay attention to Iran, Russia, and China. Second of all, they talked about General Douglas MacArthur's words being able to emphasize the consequences of being too late in understanding and preparing for conflicts, which is why the name of the article is Avoiding Too Late. And the whole concept here is that if we are late in readiness, if we are late in being prepared, if we are late in just having the correct understanding of what we are going to do when a crisis happens, which is what Lucky Palmer Lucky, the CEO of Anduril Industries, another big defense tech company that's currently private, I think valued at around $7 to $8 billion. His big entire argument has been like, we cannot wait until Ukraine gets invaded. We cannot wait until terrorists strike Israel. We need to have these things ready to go, because by the time it happens, there's too much loss of civilian life that could have been avoided if we were able to mitigate that from happening in the first place. So they issue this idea about being too late to the table. The next thing they talk about is what Russia, China, and Iran have in terms of their intentions. And Shyam's argument is that Russia, China, and Iran have been explicit about their intentions through military parades, statements, and actions, urging the United States to take their threats seriously. So when Russia said, we're going to invade Ukraine, and we basically didn't take them seriously after Crimea in 2014 for the past 8 years, and they did it, it was like, wait a second, what? But they said they were going to do it, right? When Hamas says in their charter, we want the death and destruction of Israel, they will actually try to do it. And when China, that is being very explicit, says, we want to invade Taiwan, it should come as no shock when they end up doing that, and then the entire world gets into this geopolitical crisis. So the core thesis in the article was like, look, we need to take these guys seriously because they're not messing around. We're getting into a scarier, deglobalized world, and if that's the case, we need to actually take it seriously. They then talk about a hypothetical scenario involving a conflict between the US, China, and Taiwan, and they emphasize the potential for significant human and economic losses. Remember, China said by 2027, they're very likely to invade Taiwan. The US is trying to prepare for this. If this were to happen, you have 2 nuclear-powered entities that are essentially going at it now because the United States doesn't want China to invade Taiwan, but what if you just let it happen if you don't want to get into a potential nuclear conflict with them? And now China's just like, oh, the United States let us invade Taiwan, let's see what else we can do. And so the United States is like, well, we can't do that, but if you don't want that to happen, that precedent to be set, you're going to have to get into a war. And it's like, really? Are we getting ready for a war? How many companies do have business in China? Apple, which is part of everyone's, portfolio to some extent via ETFs. Most people have exposure to that. Apple doesn't have a supply chain anymore if China invades Taiwan. So there's a lot of nuance to this. And Shyam in this article is basically just saying, can we actually talk about it? Can we take it seriously? Or are we, just going to act like it's not a big deal? Which leads me to the last point, the recommendations. The article suggests several recommendations, including mobilizing the private sector, promoting competition in defense production, reforming budget processes, and conducting realistic operational exercises to prepare for potential conflicts. Basically, everything we've heard Alex Karp talking about for the past year, their argument is you need to spend more money on software from the DoD. You need to allocate more of the budget to these particular things that are important to actually operationalize on the battlefield. So we need to have practice being able to use this stuff. And we need to take these threats seriously enough to the point where when it happens, we shouldn't have to be prepared, but we are already prepared to mitigate the results of it when it already happens. And part of that is allowing more competition for defense products, because if you have a bunch of companies competing in this space, which we're seeing in the VC space, a lot of private capital, about $34 billion last year, went just into private startups where VCs have openly said, we're looking for the next Anduril. We're looking for the next Palantir. Well, the current Palantir and Anduril are already here, which is why Palantir created FedStart, to be able to help all these private startups that are getting all this money to be able to sell into the government. So they're already here. They're doing the work they need to do. Now you want more competition in the private sector to be able to create even more innovations. And to me, what that means is that there is likely going to be a larger TAM, a larger addressable market opportunity for Palantir to be able to get more government revenue, not just from the United States, but all NATO countries that need to step up their defense, especially countries in the Baltic states that are prone to a potential Russian invasion, to be able to make sure they're secure. So this article to me was just another warning that hopefully the United States government takes seriously, that we need to be prepared. All right, that's it for me. Thank you guys for listening and watching. It really makes my day to see people comment and saying that they're enjoying the format. I'm enjoying it a lot. I'm having a ton of fun taking these stories, putting them together, and putting it into one conclusive show. So if you watch till the end, thank you very much. If you click on the video every day and you're getting value from it, I really appreciate that. Let me know your thoughts in the comments on what you think around what's going on with Palantir, the digital ministry of Ukraine, everything with this new article around Israel, and also around this UK article, if you're from the UK, around negative sentiment again around Palantir for doing what I thought was really noble, which is setting up an entire database to conduct a refugee crisis into UK, into the United Kingdom, in a matter of weeks. I mean, to me, I thought that made a lot of sense, and hopefully that means we're gonna get the NHS deal. But let me know your thoughts on all three of those subjects below in the comments. Thank you guys for listening and watching. I'll see you in the next one.